I do love that opener. Hey, Wendy.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing not so bad, honey. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. In your presence, I feel much better.
Oh, you see, I'm sending out the vibes, sending out the
vibes. And I want to welcome everybody that's here. Say welcome to Robertson. And I've said that name to people so many times. That was the clever thing about it when Wendy came up with that name 3 years ago, something like that, was nobody knows exactly. Is it Robertson and Robertson? So I like that little tricksy there. So thank you everybody for coming. And I had to, I will be honest, and I had to ask Wendy, do I go without a hat today? Because my hair is not all grown back in yet. So I feel bald and exposed. And she said, you do what you want. And I said, no, I do what you want. And so I am going without a hat today.
You know, it's liberating. Do it.
It is. It is. And so today we're going to talk about some royals. Now, I will be very honest and say, since I do not live in Great Britain, that thinking about the royals is usually secondary to anything else to think about. When I think about American history, I can go back to England thinking about American history because we kicked their butts in the American Revolution. And but then they came back and burned down our White House and stuff like that in 1812. So, but we've got a great relationship now between our two countries. And Wendy and I are doing our part to keep that alliance intact. And so, were you going to say something?
We're keeping the special relationship.
Special relationship open. And so, here we are. We're going to talk about several monarchs and how they may have brought England to its knees at one point, not in an obeisance way, a subservient way, but brought it to its knees and possibly ending that monarchy. And there are a few people out of history that did that. And it almost seems, Wendy, when you read some of this stuff, that you're looking at like, wow, every other king did something that almost shut down the monarchy. And
I mean, let's look at current news. I think you and I discussed this current news, obviously, with the Andrew Mountbatten Windsor being taken, former Prince Andrew being taken into questioning. And I think, you know, it was really interesting to know that when was the last royal that was taken in for questioning and almost arrested, and that was Charles I. And it sort of led us down a rabbit hole when we were looking at, you know, let's have a look back at some of these monarchs, because Britain, or rather, well, I go back to its, you know, England had its, you know, it was a global empire. I mean, we owned and ruled half the globe. And we, you know, we weren't happy with, and I think, you know, I sometimes wonder why we went out going to get all the globe. It's because I think we were conquered so many times, Vikings, Saxons, the Normans, etc., that we were like, that's it, we're not having any more now, we're doing the conquering. And I think that's why we were this global empire, and sadly along the way we just kind of bend over and take it now, which is really not good for Great Britain. And so we do need to put the great back into Britain.
What's sad, and I can say this as an American because I'm not acting seditiously, what's sad is seeing the takeover from the inside.
Yeah.
And you're seeing things suddenly. Well, one thing that impressed me, now, this is not a racial comment by the way of negative racism, but the last time I was in England was in 2005. And something I noticed in walking down the streets of London was there were very few Caucasian, what I would call Caucasian British people. And it looked like, wow, this is really a melting pot, this has become. There's a lot of different cultures here. There seemed to be a lot of Muslim cultures there. And that seemed to me like, this is getting into a topic that's way off of what we're talking about tonight, so I won't get into it too deeply. But we used to talk about jihad and the kinds of jihad that take place with Muslim countries. And there is jihad that is direct. I don't remember what it's called. It's just battle. It's war. You go an all-out war against somebody, jihad. Sure. And then there's a jihad, and I forget the name for it. It's one that literally means breeding in a jihad, meaning it takes 30 years. You go in, you establish yourself, you breed in your own culture, and suddenly you've got more people from your culture that are starting to run the civic duties in all the cities and the towns, mayorships, governorships, things like that. And we see some of that here already. You look at Ilhan Omar in our own Congress, and she was voted in Minnesota, in the Minneapolis area, by a segment of Minneapolis that is all Somali.
Well, I think that's what the British had in mind when we went around to all these countries, and we were like, if we can't get them out, we'll breed them out.
Right.
And certainly, as you say, quite rightly, you know, things have changed a lot in the UK. And I think we only have to look at our politics today, and some of the powers that be are falling down the mountain now. They've been, you know, they're losing their grip, their power, and people being exposed. And I think that's always the way. When we looked back at royalty, we were like, the royalty, especially the early part, they had this belief that they were absolute power and that nobody could argue with them and nobody would take the power from them. And it was like their word was law. And it is always, you know, the little people suffer.
Yes.
And those who've got money and privilege and education, etc., did better. And that's why when we looked at Charles I, which, you know, I guess we'll come to in a minute, looking back, there were so many kings. I mean, Edward Longshanks, of course, with the Scots and the Irish, you know, basically had that, if you can't get them out, we'll breed them out.
Yes. And that absolute divine right of kings fell off the lips of every one of those rulers. One of Charles I, when we get into him, one of his big sins as a monarch was believing in the absolutism of the kingship, was that he had absolute power, and he was and it was the divine right of kings. God ordained him to be king, therefore you cannot question him.
That's right.
And that led to his downfall, because some of the things he did were from the standpoint that I cannot be held to account for this because I am the account. You know, I am the king. So,
and I think we're seeing that today, certainly with Andrew, which we have to say now, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has an entitlement and believing that they can get away with and do what they want, and the little people won't find out. And if they do, well, what is it? You're nothing. And I think that there's so much more. He's just a name on a list, and I'm sure there's going to be more people. But because he's royalty, and the Queen's, some say her favorite son, some say, you know, this is a very serious situation that's going on in the UK, because, you know, this whole Jeffrey Epstein situation, and obviously Prince Andrew paying off the poor girl in question.
Right.
So much money. I think it was something like 12 million, something like that, Virginia. And literally there is sort of questions going on, like who did pay that money? The Queen was quite elderly at the time. the King Charles was taking over more and more. Obviously, regent work he was doing more and more. Did he know about the money that was being paid out? And also, if he did, that makes him, some could say, compliant.
Right.
So if it is, then you'd be looking at a very serious situation where some may call for an abdication, or which I don't think will happen. But I do think that the king isn't well, so anything is possible with that situation. Sure. But looking at where he is, even in today's, I can do what I want, say what I want, get away with it. And he's been doing, I think they called him in, wasn't it for public secrets or
something like that? Yeah. And so it was, kind of going around about it to get him there. And so, yeah, he's still a person of interest, I guess you'd say. He's still being questioned.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see where that paper trail goes. And that could indeed have some effect on the monarchy.
Yes, 100%. Because obviously, I put my glasses on now so I can actually see. Sure. Literally, if you think about it, if the king knew and he paid that money, then that would definitely put him in a very difficult position. But to him to get that far, they have to actually charge Andrew with something. He has to go through a court and he has to be found guilty. So it's a long way down the road. But I think at the moment, the royal family is having people looking at it going, do you really deserve all this money, all this power? And it's the same question that when we looked back for Charles I and even Henry VIII, going back into his time, Henry VIII, let's just briefly look at him. When he decided to break from Rome, and he believed that he was the authority in religion, and he didn't just want to divorce Rome. He wanted complete control. Right. And when he couldn't get the marriage divorced or annulment from Catherine of Aragon, and Rome refused to come into line, he just thought, well, do you know what? Sod you. I'm just going to create the Church of England. I'm going to destroy all the monasteries, and religious and civil conflict ignited. And generations.
That tells me something about what these individuals probably believed while they declare that they believe in God on one side and the theology of the church and so on. When they're wielding political power, there's one of two things that could be. Either they really don't believe there is a God behind the church because they can do whatever they want. They can manipulate it. They can do what they want. Or it goes back to that divine right of the kings. God has set me up as a king and I have a divine right to be here. Therefore, what I do is already sanctioned by God.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting when you look at all these characters, especially Henry VIII, who did the things he did, killing his wives, killing other people around them. All the things he engaged in was stuff that I would not plug into a Christian monarch.
Yeah, I mean, he was actually, and the interesting thing is that he was actually the second son. He wasn't supposed to be king, which is the same as Charles I. He wasn't supposed to be king either. And Henry VIII, obviously, when his brother Prince Arthur died of the sweating sickness, he was going to go into the church. But then obviously he was actually called the Duke of York as well, which is kind of funny. And the Dukes of York have always been questionable. The second son has always been the naughty one. A lot of them have been like that. I mean, you only have to look at Prince Harry, right? It seems that the heir has to be this one set way, and the second one can get away with it. But I think with Henry VIII, this is someone who was complete control and power. You did not cross this man. If you did cross him, I mean, his kingdom, he boiled, burnt, tortured, beheaded, so many people in his lifetime, and he wanted complete control. And obviously his future, what would he be? Now, Charles I, which I know you're going to lead us into, Charles I was actually Henry VIII's sister's great grandson or something like that, wasn't he?
Something like that, yeah. All these discombobulated family trees of the royals is amazing. Well, I was your second cousin's son to her second husband, who was the uncle of the current king. Therefore, I have divine right of, monarchical ascendancy.
Yeah,
that's the stuff they did. So it's pretty crazy.
I'm sure he was. Let me get this right. Henry VIII's sister was Margaret. She went to Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter, I think it was. I'm sure it would have been his great sort of nephew, something like that. And they came to the throne because when Elizabeth Tudor died, Elizabeth, the golden age, when she died, they were the next in line, and that's how the Stuarts came to the throne.
Yes. And that's a whole interesting thing right there too. Frankly, Mary, Queen of Scots, had almost more solid right to claim the English throne than did Elizabeth, when you look at all the successions.
Mm-hmm.
But she ended up losing she got on the short end of that stick.
She did.
And we talked about that last time a little bit.
Well, I mean, in a way, her son sold her out. He was told you can be king, or you can help your mother.
Right.
He chose the right path for him.
Right. Well, shall we take a look at Charles I?
Charles, tell us a bit about Charles I.
He's a pretty dynamic figure, very dramatic figure.
Absolutely.
In English history. And he's one of those kings whose life reads like a Shakespeare play.
Mm-hmm.
His proud, conviction, political miscalculation. And he was a very public and very shocking ending to his reign and his life. To put him in context, he was born in 1600. Remember, Queen Elizabeth didn't she rule for like 70 years or something like that?
She was,
and she died in 1623, I think.
Something like that.
So James the First ruled. No, this is James the First was born 1600. Yeah. He reigned from 1625 to 1649.
But James the First is would have been the great nephew, I think, of Henry VIII. Yeah.
Yes, and then it was Mary, Queen of Scots' son, James II, who succeeded him. If I've got that right. But James I believed very firmly in the divine right of kings. The idea that the monarchs answered only to God and nobody else, that they didn't answer to Parliament even. And that belief shaped everything that followed with Charles I. And he lost his throne because he repeatedly clashed with Parliament over taxes. Yep. He tried to raise money without parliamentary approval. Religion. Many feared he leaned too Catholic. And absolute authority. Those were his three major problems. And in 1629, he actually dissolved Parliament, and he ruled alone for 11 years, a period known as the personal rule of Charles I. And that did not go over real well with the people. And tensions eventually exploded into the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651. And this was between the royalists, who were loyal to the king, and the parliamentarians, led by none other than Oliver Cromwell. And Charles, of course, was defeated. Now, here was the unthinkable thing that took place with him. In 1649, Charles was tried for treason. The king of the country tried for treason against his own people. This was an unprecedented act. And a reigning monarch put on trial by his subjects. And he was executed outside the banqueting house in London. Yes. And all of Europe was stunned. The monarchy in Europe was absolutely stunned by this. Kings were not supposed to be executed by their own citizens. And England briefly became a republic like the United States, but a commonwealth under Cromwell. And of course, the legacy that Charles I leaves behind is his son returned as Charles II of England, and his death permanently shifted the balance of power toward Parliament. And he became, in some circles, a martyr for the monarchy. And so now here's something else that we need to break down just for a couple of minutes, because what counts as the crimes committed by Charles I that ended up with him being executed, having his head cut off in the public square? What was he officially charged with? I had to look that one up. I knew it was treason, but what happened? In 1649, Parliament charged him with high treason against the people of England. And that alone was revolutionary enough. But until then, treason meant betraying the king. So now the king was accused of betraying the nation. And the formal charge said he had tried to establish an unlimited and tyrannical power, that he made war against Parliament and his own subjects, and that he caused bloodshed in the Civil War. And he refused to recognize the court's authority. He never even entered a plea. He refused to recognize their authority, even though he's being held under it. He was executed anyway. So what were his crimes in practice? Here's what he did. He ruled without Parliament from 1629 to 1640. He dissolved Parliament, governed alone, raised money through forced loans, arbitrary fines, ship money taxes, traditionally coastal defense taxes, and he expanded them inland, and many saw this as unconstitutional. And then his religious policies, he backed Archbishop Laud and pushed high church Anglican reforms. The Puritans believed he was sliding toward Catholicism, and he married a Catholic princess, Henrietta Maria, and he persecuted dissenters. And he tried imposing an English prayer book on Scotland, which triggered rebellion and forced him to recall Parliament. And that backfired spectacularly. Then he started the Civil War. When Parliament resisted him, tensions exploded into the English Civil War. He raised an army against his own Parliament. And from Parliament's view, that was treason. From his view, they were rebelling against divinely appointed authority. And this is the crux of the entire campaign. There were all these secret negotiations, all this double dealing. And even while in prison, Charles I secretly negotiated with different factions, trying to play them against each other. And this destroyed trust in him. And Parliament concluded, you can't negotiate with a king who believes he answers only to God. And that's what sealed his fate. So the big question that we're left with, was he evil? Was he a bad guy? That's the interesting part.
I think just to give the reason why we pick up Charles I is because, England without a monarchy is kind of scary, because that would leave the prime minister the head of the country. Nobody wants a prime minister in this country to be the head of the church, right? And head of the country too, because the royal family are head of the Church of England. They are seen as the spiritual head. They're also seen as the head of the country. So the king is, even today, King Charles, he is seen, without the monarchy, then who would be the head of the church? You wouldn't have one, but the prime minister, God help us, would actually be in charge. The thing about Charles I is that he'd grown up, he was never expected to be king. His brother died very, very suddenly. His father was a known homosexual. He'd seen a lot of his father's shenanigans, and even though he was happily married, if you call it, his father was happily married at the time.
Say that word shenanigan again.
There were a lot of shenanigans going down, and he actually saw there was the witch trials through James I. Yes. Reign. So Charles saw a lot from his dad's, and watching his father, and it was like, okay, good to know, tick, 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 tick. And I think that he got to a point where he was like, who is in control? God or king? And he wanted complete control. I mean, he was so demanding. He wanted so much money. He actually got rid of Parliament. I didn't realize this, for 11 years.
Yes.
Right? I didn't realize that we had no parliament.
That was called the personal monarchy, or the personal rule of Charles I, that 11 years.
And then when he wanted something, he'd bring them back and say,
Yep.
okay, I'm bringing you
And
back.
that kept backfiring on him.
And they'd go like, well, no, we're not doing it. Well, then I'm getting rid of you again. The king still has the power today to actually dismiss government if he wanted to. However, that will never, I doubt that very much.
Well, you know, the interesting part too was that he wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't this evil man. He wasn't this wild tyrant like some medieval despots. He was personally dignified. He was devout. He was cultured. He was a patron of the arts, but he was rigid as hell and convinced that he was right about everything because of this divine right of kings. And he was unable to bend politically at all. And this is what got his you know, everything in a wanker with Charles, or with Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell. And in a changing England where Parliament was growing in power, that rigidity became fatal to Charles I. And the real crime in historical terms, when you look at this, Wendy, his real crime in historical terms, well, may not have been tyranny at all. It may have been misreading the moment. He governed like it was still 1500, and England had moved on. So that's what really got his head cut off.
I also think, you know, he was very brave. I mean, you know, you're killing the King of England, right? You are literally dragging him in front of all of his subjects.
Yes.
And you are cutting his head off. And meanwhile, his children are fleeing the country, to get out. And he wore an extra like a vest or top, because it was quite a cold day. It was in March, I think, quite a cold day. And obviously he didn't want to be seen that he was shivering. He also had a stutter, which I didn't realize. He always had a stammer. And so when he was stressed or nervous, he would have this stammer, and he didn't want to appear. He wanted to be brave until the end. But the thing is, Oliver Cromwell, when Charles was killed, England became quite awful, because we became a republic. The monarchy was abolished. They got rid of all the crown jewels and everything like that, and they either destroyed them or sold them or melted them down. There was no king for 10 years. No king, no queen, I think. And you weren't allowed to do Christmas. There was no dancing. Everything was looked down upon. Cromwell was absolute power. And in the end, I think he realized when he took it on, Cromwell, he realized just how difficult it was, because, you know,
Puritan.
He was absolutely not happy with, you know, you weren't allowed to show a lot of fun and enjoyment, and I think alcohol and all that kind of thing was all sort of banned. It was, and he actually ended up living in Hampton Court Palace, which had been the home of so many monarchs for so long. And they were like, well, hang on a minute, you wanted to get rid of the monarchy, but now you're living in his palace.
Practically became monarchy himself.
Yes, he did. He was the head of the country.
By another name,
yeah. And I think that Charles was undone by, he was so certain that he was right and that he was king. And look at Andrew. Let's look at Andrew at the moment. So certain about what he's doing. So certain about, like, I have absolute right and certainty to do this and go where I want. And it comes back and bites you. And unfortunately, I mean, thankfully for Andrew, they don't cut people's heads off anymore in the country. But I also think as well, it was January the 30th, my mistake. And the Banqueting House is beautiful. If you've never been to Banqueting House in London, it's absolutely stunning. They put up a scaffold. They built through the window. So he walked out. So they were all underneath him, so no one would try and rescue him. And apparently shops closed. There was silence. This was something no nation had ever done. They killed its own king.
Right.
Not in battle, not assassination. By legal law, they killed their king. And you know what? The royal family has never forgotten that. They have never forgotten that they can have their power taken away by government just like this.
Right.
And they also know that, you know, and what's interesting, you talked about Charles II. Charles II eventually came back to England. He dug, Oliver Cromwell was dead by then. He dug up Oliver Cromwell, and his body was obviously quite gone by that point. And then he drawn and quartered him, and then he dragged his body around London, tearing it into pieces because of what he did to his father. And you know, when Charles died, and they gave him an axe, not a sword, an axe, because the axe is the traitor. The only one that really got the sword, I think, was Anne Boleyn. And nobody cheered at all. Nobody cheered. There was just a moan, and people were going up with their handkerchiefs, dipping it into his blood, and you know, to keep it as a relic because they loved him, you know.
Yeah.
But it killed that day. It killed the idea that a king rules by divine protection. He only rules by his people and government, and that's something the royal family's never forgotten.
Right. And I think that was one of the first big tests of the monarchy in the more modern age. It wasn't just meaning not medieval.
Yeah.
Moving up into the Tudor period. And so who have you got next on your list? I got a couple of other guys.
My next one on my list is, well, Charles II never had any children, though he had over 100 illegitimate kids, right?
Sure. But none of them could take the throne.
The man was a stud. He was busy, right? He was here, there, and everywhere. But he didn't have any heirs. But there is
my 17 illegitimate children around the country.
Exactly. But there's an interesting point here, which we bring it back to present day. When Prince William comes to the throne, he's actually a direct descendant from Charles II illegitimate line. So actually, one of Charles II's line will actually be King of England, which is kind of interesting. The next one would be James II. Now, he was actually Charles' younger brother, and he was a Catholic in every sense of the word. He didn't want to, you know, he was ruling a Protestant nation, and they didn't really like the fact that he was a Catholic. Because England had broken away from Rome, and, you know, since Henry VIII took him out, you know, the whole fear was we're going to have a monarch that takes us back into Rome. We're going to have a monarch that makes us Catholics, and nobody wanted to go back to that that life. So he kind of upset quite a lot of people. He appointed Catholics to very powerful positions, which didn't go down well. And he yet again suspended laws via having complete royal authority. Obviously hadn't learned anything via his grandfather. And also they raised fears that when his son was born, it would be a Catholic dynasty. And you've got to realize in England at that time, you had two religions, and the Protestants hated the Catholics hated the Protestants. It's gone on for many, many hundreds of years. Religion has divided so many people. And, you know, you had a boiling pot. You only had to stir that boiling pot so much the wrong way, and you'd have a war on you. So people and Parliament was panic going, hang on a minute, what do you mean? You know, he's not obviously not learned anything at all. And so Parliament had to do something about it. And that's where William of Orange, who married Mary. So what actually did, James fled. He fled the country and left it without a monarch. And what they did is they brought in his daughter Mary, and she married William of Orange, and they ruled England jointly. And obviously William of Orange is well known. If you're in Northern Ireland and you see the orange in the summertime, they do their what do they call those marches? But it's all like the bands are playing and they have all the orange banners,
right?
The Protestant banners. That's where William of Orange comes from. And so the monarchy survived again because someone fled. They had to find someone else. They took the daughter. But the one thing they agreed was you have to surrender power to the Parliament forever. There is no more ruling divine. You didn't do too well with your grandfather. Well, it would have been actually, yeah, your grandfather, great grandfather. It's not going to do very well by you. So that's when England became ruled by two monarchs, Protestant monarchs, and it carried on since then. And the reason we're showing just snippets of this is because when you look at the royal family today and what was happening with Prince Andrew and the Constitution and what could happen with King Charles and everything else, they cannot have another scandal because they know how it leads and where it goes. If the people go against the royal family, they're screwed. I mean, they really are, not financially, but they're screwed as in the fact they will lose what they do. And then the next one we came up with, wasn't it? I think what she found was George III, right? And his son, the Mad King.
Yes.
He,
I
George,
have some interesting stuff on him too.
Yeah, go on, tell me, because George III is one of my favorites because he was such a good guy, actually.
I know. Now, I like George III. I especially loved the way he was portrayed in The Madness of King George.
Yeah.
Who was that? Nigel somebody that played him?
Yeah,
he was also in Hello, Prime Minister or something like that. It was a great British TV series, comedy series.
Yeah.
Was it Hello, Prime Minister?
It was Yes, Prime Minister.
Yes, Prime Minister.
Yes, Prime Minister.
So now he reigned from 1760 to 1820. And his nickname in America was the Tyrant King. And reality in Britain was far more complicated than that. And the American Revolution took place during his reign. And during the American Revolution, did he nearly destroy Britain? That's the question that's posed. And you got to frame it a little properly here. So by 1763, Britain had just won the 7 Years' War. Or as those are familiar with my show, I brought out my red coat and stuff like that before in my kilt. We portrayed the Scots during the 7 Years' War. We knew it in America as the French and Indian War. And here's a pop quiz. Does anybody know how long the 7 Years' War lasted? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
7 years. But it was drowning in debt. And this was about 15 years or so before the American Revolution started. And so the solution, Britain taxed the colonies and entered the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Tea Act, and from London's perspective, fair contribution for imperial defense. And from the colonists' perspective, taxation without representation. So things escalated. As we all know, we know little bits and pieces. If you don't know the whole history, that was the basics of the American Revolution. It was, like anything else, economics. And who was going to govern the economics and who was going to be free to rule themselves versus under subjects to a king. So when unrest grew, Parliament passed the Coercive Acts, the Intolerable Acts, they were called. George III supported firm action. And in 1775, war broke out. 1776, the Declaration of Independence explicitly blamed him, not Parliament, for being the tyrant. And that's very significant. Thomas Jefferson called him a tyrant who obstructed justice, kept standing armies, imposed taxes without consent, waged war against his own subjects, which is something Charles I did. And he became the villain symbol. But here's the twist on George III. He did not personally design most of those policies. They were driven by Parliament and prime ministers like Lord North. However, George supported Lord North's war effort long after it became unwinnable. So that's where historians debate his judgment. So did this nearly destroy Britain? Yes, but not in the way Charles I did. Consider the risks. There was the loss of the American colonies, 1783, the end of the American Revolution. Britain lost its most populous colonies, enormous trade potential, prestige, and for a moment it looked like imperial decline had begun. And many in Britain blamed the king. There were even riots in London. Then there was political crises at home.
Now that's unusual.
What's that?
Riots in London, hey.
Right? Oh yeah, go figure.
Yeah.
War split Parliament. It fractured political alliances. It shook public confidence in the monarchy. That's the big thing. When the people start losing confidence in the monarchy, which is something you'll see repeated in current day, it shakes the country to its core. And if Britain had descended into revolution like France just a few years later with the French Revolution, the monarchy could have been in serious danger. But something critical happened. The Scarlet Pimpernel. Have any of you ever seen that movie or read that book?
Cool. Yeah.
The Scarlet Pimpernel. They seek him here. They seek him there. Those Frenchies seek him everywhere. Scarlet Pimpernel. He didn't try to override Parliament. He didn't suspend civil liberties wholesale. But the madness factor, now this comes in a little bit later. Later in life, George III suffered severe mental illness, possibly porphyria or bipolar disorder of some kind. And during his bouts of illness, Parliament had to consider a regency crisis. And that exposed how fragile the system could be if the monarch became incapacitated.
I mean, why are you bringing that up? Let's just look at him when he got sick. I mean, this man suffered. He suffered so much. And the fact is, back then, you've got doctors that are looking at their pee and their poo and going, I'm not really sure. He basically had complete confusion. He didn't know. He didn't know who you were and was completely confused and would go off and talk to people that weren't there and felt someone was still alive when they weren't. He had incoherent speech. He had paranoia. He was paranoid. And he had periods of being totally incapacitated. He would mess himself. He would cry endlessly. He would hide himself. And they physically restrained this man. I mean, you're talking about the King of England. They physically restrained him. They tied him up. They put something in his mouth so he couldn't scream and he couldn't shout. They bled him. They put leeches on him. They tried him in the hot bath, the cold baths. If he spoke, he was slapped. He was treated. It was awful. Guy, what he went through, I can't believe for him. It must have been terrible and Britain suddenly had a king where he couldn't rule. You couldn't execute him, you couldn't vote him out, and you couldn't replace him because he was the father of of the nation, yet he was really ill. And I feel for him because he must have been terrified in those moments.
Yes.
And what is wrong with me?
And if you have not seen it, folks, you should watch the movie The Madness of King George.
It's terrible.
Very well done. And it's, of course, some of that's fictionalized to fill in the gaps, but it showed what he went through and what his wife, I think isn't Helen?
Yeah, Queen Charlotte, Helen Mirren. Yeah,
Mirren. Yes, she played Queen Charlotte, and the movie was astoundingly good. So you should take a look at that. And but he nearly weakened the country through his imperial overreach, the stubborn wartime commitment. But he ultimately strengthened constitutional monarchy by not trying to rule absolutely. And ironically, after losing America, Britain reformed its empire. It pivoted. It expanded elsewhere. It became dominant 19th century global power. And here's some contrast. I think this is very interesting. Charles I destroyed trust at home and was executed. George III lost an empire abroad and survived. One died for absolutism, one endured by constitutionalism. And here's the delicious irony. In America, he's remembered as a tyrant. In Britain, he's remembered as a dutiful, stubborn, but fundamentally constitutional king who weathered crisis.
He was loved. You know,
he was loved by his people.
Yeah, they did.
So
unlike his son, who actually, let me just bring up a picture of this guy, because I do actually have, let's bring him up. The Prince Regent.
George III, talking about?
This is the Mad King's son, the Prince Regent. Wildly unpopular. So when he became King George was just too unwell.
Yes.
They had to bring in someone to take care of it, and this is why they brought in the Prince Regent.
Wasn't George III a pernicious gambler, womanizer, carouser, all of just very carefree with family funds and government funds and monarchical funds? And
so King George III is the Mad King. His son, who is this gentleman here, he was the Prince Regent. He was George IV. He was a gambler. He was he believed yet again in having complete control and being very self-indulgent, very similar to someone in current news, very self-indulgent, very extravagant, deeply in debt, went to anyone that could get him out of debt, and had morals that could be questionable. He also married a Catholic, really nobody. And when they found out, because he married her in front of a priest as well, when the royal family found out, that was got rid of, and he was kicked into touch. But this man, the son, people dreaded him coming to power. They looked at the father and thought, well, yeah, do we have a mad king, or do we have the son who's just, you know, out of control? And I think this is the thing that we're trying to show with what's going on in current results with the UK monarchy and Prince Andrew right now. Prince Andrew is seen as, or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, it's very hard to actually, after all these years of saying it, to actually go to not, is seen as extravagant, self-indulgent, had debt, and morally questionable. There isn't much difference between, you know, King George IV and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Right. Not much at all.
And it's like the apple really doesn't fall far from the tree. And I think that his illness, George III's illness, forced Britain to bring in something which is rule without replacing, which is when the Queen became unwell, Queen Elizabeth II became unwell, she gave more and more power to Prince Charles. Now, and this is where the question comes in: if Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is taken into court, and they go and is found guilty, who paid the money to that poor lady? Who paid the money? Was it, who signed the check? Was it the Queen Elizabeth, or was it King Charles? That's when if it was King Charles, then you have lots of other issues coming up there. So it's like, even though England has seen this in history, it's still repeating.
Yes.
It's still repeating now.
That's whenever you have human beings, people in charge of other people, and in these monarchies even, you'll get some good people, you get some bad people, and people that will take advantage. And I think many of these, especially second and third generation, when their fathers have ruled or grandfathers have ruled, you'll see them as growing up believing they deserve all the rights that they're given. Yeah. And they don't have to, monarchy doesn't usually have to fight for their right to be the monarch, but some of these people, it was the given that they were who they were, and you are the peasant, and so on. So
look at the future, look at the past.
Mm-hmm.
Because have we really learned from some of our past, or are we still making those mistakes? And I think, you know, the next one we're looking at, which I know we have to look at it from the England and the American point of view, was Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
The king who chose love over the crown.
Yes. And I have some stuff on him. If you want me to go ahead with that.
Okay, you start.
By the way, I have to mention George II, who came before George I. His big thing was the Jacobite Rebellion in Scotland. The support of Charles Edward Stuart, Bonnie Prince Charlie, and all of that. And so it was under his rule. The Jacobite Rebellion was in 1745, and in 1746, Lord Cumberland met the forces of Bonnie Prince Charlie at Culloden Moor outside of Inverness, which is at the tip of Loch Ness, and totally defeated the clan system of self-governance. And they defeated all the Highland clans, and they had the clearances of the Highlands after that. It became under penalty of death. You couldn't wear your kilt or speak Gaelic, Scots Gaelic. You couldn't play the bagpipes, all of that kind of stuff. And it eventually loosened up when the king, it was the Hanoverian king, the German king, German George they called him.
That's right.
That he said, what a waste of manpower. Let's just let them keep their clans and their chieftains keep their roles, bring them in as the regiments. And so they became all British regiments, and they were able to have some semblance of their clan order that was left over. Clan chieftains became like the generals. They were the heads of the clan system that was the different regiments. So that all happened under George II. Totally different show, totally different thing. But that was George II was the guy that ruled over all of that. Now, I've gone through, I looked at some different acts and things like that. I've got some stuff on Prince Andrew here. But what I really wanted to look at, I'm taking a look at my notes here.
Was it Edward VIII and Wallace Simpson?
Edward VIII. And let's see, did I actually somehow skip him?
While you're doing that, I'm going to talk about Wallace Simpson, because I think people, when I talk about Wallace Simpson, will actually start to look at modern day. Wallace Simpson obviously was American. She didn't start a war. She didn't lead a rebellion. She didn't change parliament. And yet she triggered one of the greatest constitutional crises in modern royal history. She had been divorced. She was now in the process of divorcing again. And in 1930, that was not cricket. That was not something you did. And the king wasn't just head of state. He was also supreme governor of the Church of England. And at that time, the church did not recognize remarriage after a divorce if a former spouse was still alive. So because her two husbands were still alive, the woman he loved, who Edward VIII wanted to marry, he was religiously forbidden. So let's repeat that again, religiously forbidden to marry. Now, let's look at current, because we're relating this again. Prince Harry has married Meghan Markle. She's American, an actress. She'd been married, I think she'd been married before and divorced. Her husband is still alive as well. There was a lot of talk about when Harry married Meghan, like, she's divorced, there's a past with her. Is this something we want to do? And of course, now look at present day, you don't never stop hearing about Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, etc. But it all began really with, they should have known, with Edward VIII when he met Wallace.
Yes.
Before he became king.
Well, and you know what that did was it just sparked and triggered the most serious constitutional crisis in modern British royal history. And that was he reigned just 90 years ago, 1936. For 1 year, he fell in love with Wallace Simpson. She was an American who was twice divorced, living with ex-husbands. And in 36, this was absolutely explosive, even on the social scheme of things in the 1930s. And he was also the supreme governor of the Church of England. And at the time, the church did not permit the remarriage, which, Wendy, you already said and talked about. especially after a divorce if a former spouse was still alive.
Yeah.
So the issue wasn't just romance, it was religious, constitutional, political, imperial. Dominions like Canada and Australia had to agree. So why it nearly broke the monarchy was the Prime Minister, Stanley Baldwin. He made it clear the government would resign if Edward married her. Public opinion was divided. The Dominions opposed the marriage. Edward proposed a morganatic, I can't even say the word, there's too many syllables. Morganatic in Renegrangi marriage, where she would not be the queen.
Yeah.
And the government rejected that. And at that point, he had three options: break up with Wallis, the woman you love, marry her and trigger a constitutional showdown, or abdicate. And he chose abdication. That was in December of 1936. His famous broadcast, he said, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility without the help and support of the woman I love." And he signed the instrument of abdication. The crown passed to his brother, George V. And that transition stabilized the monarchy, but barely.
Actually, it was George VI. That was his brother. Do you remember the film? Have you seen The King's Speech? You might have a lot of people seen, and you see that George VI had a stammer. Isn't that interesting that Charles I had a stammer as well?
Yes. And he got up and gave a brilliant speech. The King's Speech. It's well worth watching.
It's an amazing. But they actually. One point I just wanted to pick you up there with Wallis Simpson is the fact that she was not liked. She didn't have a character that was liked. Edward VIII was again seen indulgent, had debt, felt he was entitled. He was a bit of a playboy. And it was like, let him go out and sow. It sounds very familiar to comment to public thing, right? Let him go out and sow his wild oats, and then he'll find a proper queen. So when he found Wallis Simpson, and he became king, and she came over here. The queen, what do we call her now? I suppose the queen, the king's grandmother, the original queen mother, absolutely refused to speak to her. She refused to speak to her, and she blamed her for the rest of her life. She blamed Wallis Simpson for George VI's early death, because she said it was the pressure of taking over from Edward that she blamed killed her husband. So why is it, Scotty, when we're looking at these men, they've all got this entitlement of ego? I can do what I want. I can have what woman I want. There is this real entitlement.
I think it's an entitlement that's bred by position. They're monarchs. They're not normal people. They're not a guy who started a company and rose to be the CEO and is filthy rich. They are monarchs with even though Great Britain no longer goes by the divine right of kings, there is I would take it out of the theological realm and put it into the realm of there is the right of monarchy that they believe exists. Now, they know it can be fragile. It can be taken away if they do the wrong things, but they are the royal family. And this is who the people look to. The people love their monarchy. And they believe they have the right to be there doing that. And I'm not saying in a negative way. This is who we've got to take ourselves and remove ourselves from being common folk and put yourself in the understanding of being royal folk. What do the simple folk do? That thing.
The thing I find interesting, though, is that Wallis is seen as a villain. And even now, she's still seen as the villain, a social climber, a manipulator, a temptress, the woman who stole a king. And from what I've heard and read about their relationship, she was the boss. She was very much the boss. He had mummy issues for sure. He was never shown much affection or attention by his, you didn't back then, by his father or his mother. And I think with Wallace, he could he'd always go for sort of a woman that would support him and be lots of loving and come here on my bosom and tell me all your problems, sort of thing,
right.
And also people were saying, oh, she bewitched him. It's all about sex, that's going to run out. She broke the crown or whatever. But he really loved this woman.
He did.
He really loved her. And the thing is, sometimes we don't see that someone really loves someone because it doesn't fit into the narrative.
Right. And one of the real tensions of why this was so dangerous to the monarchy was because they were dependent on Parliament.
Sure.
And there was this fragility of royal authority combined now with the tension of personal desire and public duty.
Yeah.
And the darker layer, he also showed some sympathizing toward Nazi Germany.
He did.
And he visited Hitler in 1937. If he'd remained king during World War II, that could have been catastrophic for Britain's moral authority.
Can you imagine it?
Oh, yeah. So here's a show through for us. Once again, King Charles I destroyed the monarchy through absolutism. James II through religious miscalculation. George III through imperial conflict. Edward VIII through personal recklessness. And here's the key line. Edward VIII didn't lose the throne because he loved someone. He lost it because he misjudged the weight of the crown and how far he could go.
Well, she actually didn't want it. That's the other thing about Wallace. She didn't actually want to be queen. In fact, she actually urged him to reconsider. But the thing is, he was obsessed with this woman. Obsessed. She was actually heard to say, she was trying to push him away. He would not give her up for anything. He was like, it's you or nothing. And by the time he had given up the throne, she was become the symbol of like, it's because of her. It's because of you. They were never invited to Christmas. They were never really invited. They were never invited back into the family again.
Sure.
And the thing about it as well, he chose love over duty, which a lot of people, they do.
And the fascinating twist with that is his abdication may have actually saved the monarchy long term.
Yes,
because George VI and later Elizabeth II restored the image of duty over self and stability over drama and service over spectacle. Yeah. And that modern idea of monarchy is what still holds today in Great Britain. So,
and as we must look at finally, because the last one is Prince Andrew.
Yes.
Or as we like to call him now, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Now this is ongoing. He hasn't threatened the crown with religion or politics, but he's re-threatened it in a way that's really kind of dangerous. Reputation as in the fact that he had a long-standing association with Jeffrey Epstein, and it became public knowledge over time through photos, through flight logs, through connections, including Sarah, Duchess of York, is known to have been quite close to Jeffrey Epstein, and indeed had maybe potentially, if what we've heard is true, a sexual relationship with him. Sure. And this is about judgment, character, and royal accountability. If you're royal, you have to be accountable for what you do, because you are given great privilege, great financial and great opportunity. You cannot be seen to be taking, as we like to call it over here, the piss. And quite frankly, Andrew had he gave an interview in 2019, which I'm sure a lot of people watched, and it was meant to clear his name, and it was a car crash, Scotty. Yeah. It was awful. It was like, I remember watching it like this, right? Mm-hmm. Thinking, why the hell are you doing it? It was one of the most
why are you even talking?
One of the most damaging moments for royal PR history. And he didn't show empathy for any of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Right. He defended continued conduct with Jeffrey Epstein. And he offered explanations like, I was in a Pizza Express in Woking on that particular day, and I know I was there because it's not really the sort of place I normally go to.
Right.
And I'm like, what? Public confidence collapsed almost overnight. But let me just rewind back something. Prince Andrew was seen as a Falklands hero, Falklands War hero. There's a photograph of him coming back into, I think it's Portsmouth, with a rose in his mouth, giving it to his mother. He was the favourite of the Queen Elizabeth. He was her favourite child. He couldn't really do anything wrong. When he married Fergie, Sarah Duchess of York, we all watched the wedding. We all said, well, this marriage is going to go the distance because it's not Charles and Diana. They can't get enough of each other. What we've now discovered, or are discovering, was that this was a marriage that was open straight away. It was open marriage. Mm-hmm. They both started to have affairs as long as those children were by, Prince Andrew at the time. Right. They could basically do what they want. So this is a situation that this has been going on, and they are giving a lot of money. They are given entitlement. They are given titles and opportunities and planes to fly on, and he was actually I can't remember his title, but it was like he was supposed to go out and promote Britain. He was there as one of them, and he has put the royal family presently and currently into a very dangerous position. And all the past ones we've talked about tonight, and you've looked at those, have they really not learned anything? Because 100, 400, 500 years ago, things would be very, very different. He stepped back from public duties. He's lost his military titles. He's relinquished his patronage. He's no longer a working royal. He has no protection at all. And he, the civil case was settled out of court in 2022 without admission of liability. And the problem is with that is that somewhere in life you have to show, I take responsibility for my actions. I am, I take accountability for this. I was at fault. Right. And he hasn't shown any kind of, I've learnt, because not only he went out there to tell Jeffrey Epstein, I'm sorry, I can't be friends with you. And while he was there, he had a dinner party with him. I'm sorry, that's not what you do.
Nope.
And so in a way, monarchy doesn't fall through always wars. It falls through the people taking it back, and there's a lot of people at the moment right now with a lot of questions over here going, do we need the monarchy?
Right.
Do need the monarchy? What do we need? Now, if you brought up Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, there is no one that can turn around and say, well, she would have made a wonderful queen, and she should have been, she was fantastic. And I actually think what she must think of her brother, because this is their brother. I mean, this is the king's brother. What must he think? First of all, his son is exiled in America with his wife, and he doesn't really see much of his grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And there's a complete whole new story about the grandchildren, who they are, where they come from, etc., etc. And that still goes on in many conspiracy theories. And now he's got to deal with, this situation. And what I'm sort of worried about is what it could do down the road, because I actually I am a monarchist, but I'm also, they have to take accountability for their actions. They can't just get away with what they're doing for nothing. And I think, Virginia, I'm trying to pronounce her name. Can you pronounce her name? Virginia Giff? I can't pronounce her name. Sorry.
I don't have it in front of me. Judith or Giddith.
Something like that. And this poor lady is no longer with us anymore because sadly she lost her life recently. There's a lot of talk about that as well. I think that he was, if the Queen had been alive, I doubt very much this would be happening.
Right.
And the king is in a very different position now because he's like, he's ill. He's got this cancer. Some say it's not great. And basically, you know, he's lost his voice, Andrew. No one's interested. The next time you hear from him, it could be from a court case. And we have seen how court cases go with royals, because you only have to look at Henry or Prince Harry.
Right.
With at the moment. So to be honest, when we wanted to look at this tonight, is the monarchy evolving? Have they learned? Could it collapse under scandal, or can it contain it? And can it separate the individual from the institution? So can we get Andrew, put him here, get rid of him, but still carry on with the institution? And also, if it carries on and Charles, God forbid, had to abdicate, then that would bring Prince William or King William VI, I think he'll be at that point. And as I said, he's a direct descendant of Charles II, right? So, you know, it's almost like Charles I is his great, you know, grandfather. It's so interesting when we look down and we looked at all this, is that this country has not learned a lot, but it has learned a lot. But at the moment, I have to be honest, the whole scandal with Andrew, I mean, he was known as Randy Andy. He was known as the Playboy Prince, you know, and Koo Stark. I mean, he had a love affair with Koo Stark. She was in a soft porn film. He wasn't allowed to marry her. Who knows what would have happened had he married her? And I think Sarah, Duchess of York, has her own issues and troubles. I think they're both troubled in many ways. But if he is guilty and should go to court and anything happen like that, that is going to take the monarchy in a very, very different way. And I think that Prince Charles may not need to step down because his health is not great. He may actually step aside due to health, and that's the one way of bringing in William and Catherine.
I think what's happening to the monarchy is the same thing we see happening in politics and the world in general, how much the world has changed in the last century, in the last 50 years. The different social mores, the different customs, the different way we view people in charge. You know, you look at people are asking, why do we need a monarchy at all? Why can't the people rule themselves? You know, there's that kind of thing all the time. So I think that's affected everything that's going on as well.
Now, I know that we're only doing we're finishing up now because I know you've got to run, and so what I wanted to look at, I wrote some things down, and it's like looking back what we were talking about tonight. Has the crown ever truly been safe? Because if you think about the crown, not from war, not from religious, not from belief, not from love, it's never been safe from the people who wore it. Charles I, as you said, believed in authority. James II, religion above his people. Henry VIII reshaped religion into what he wanted, and to hell with anybody else. George III, with mental illness, his son just not liked, full stop. And then Edward VIII choosing love. And now Prince Andrew showed that monarchy can no longer survive scandal through silence. And so this is no army, this is no war. It's like, it's got to survive. How do they survive? How do they get through this? Because we cannot lose our monarchy. Right. Because yet again, if we are to lose our monarchy, this country goes back into being a republic. Yes. Didn't do well the first time, although it's many, 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 many years later. I do not fancy Keir Starmer being the head of this country. Thank you very much. Or even Nigel Farage, or putting it to, and you guys have a president, so he's the head of your country. But I don't I want it to stay. I think William and Catherine will take this country to a very different level. And it's kind of funny that Princess Diana's legacy lives on through her son, and Charles II's legacy lives on through his great,
Right.
grandchild. The monarchy will endure, not because it's unbreakable, but because time and time again it's learned how to not shatter. And I think, watch this space when it comes to what's going on with Andrew. It is not over. This is far from over. And I think England sits on a very sticky wicket right now. And I think it's interesting that we did the whole Scottish thing and Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots last week.
Mm-hmm.
And power over England. England had so many people that wanted to control it and have power over it. And its own monarchs have screwed it up so many times. And now here we sit talking about all these gentlemen, not women, but gentlemen. And if Andrew is guilty, where does that leave the beloved Queen Elizabeth II memory?
Right. She would be the standout for certain. So, but she would be swept away in the memory of the monarchy. So
it's interesting. So, we hope that people have learned a little bit tonight. And when they look at current events, when they look at what's going on, they can look back to the past and go, well, the apple hasn't really fallen far from the tree.
Right. Well, and there we go. That's there's a lot more that could be said, but then again, this is in brief, and so there's not a lot more that needs to be said.
Watch this space.
Right. So,
and I know, and this time, I mean, obviously, like, we were last week, I led it, this week you led it, and it's like we won't be back now for 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
which will be the 12th of March. I can't believe that, 12th of March. And all being well, God willing, I will be in Canada.
yes.
So I'll be right next door. I'll be waving.
That's right.
So in the meantime, Scotty, any news from you? What's happening with your stuff?
No new news. I have taken a little time off of the captain's log. It's been a week now, and I'm going to probably finish out this week without doing a captain's log and hit it back again fast and furious next week. Just needed a break. That's all. Mm-hmm. And I had to put on a suit yesterday. And something I noticed is from this last year, I put on my suit, even this one, the suit coat. I drown in these things now. I'm so,
right.
I went to the kids' school yesterday, the middle school, and I had all the ladies at the desk said, "We didn't recognize you when you were walking up. You're so skinny." I said, "Oh, it wasn't the false leg?" So, that's that's probably, you ask how things are going. I'm noticing my suits are too big, and my pants are all too big. And some of my shirts that were tight around my belly, I have no belly anymore. So that's a new thing with me right now. So it looks good when I'm sitting down and it's buttoned up, but that's new.
I was just saying tonight, I'm going the other way. I need to lose a few pounds, because where I've been unwell, and with the asthma you have steroids and etc. as well, and you eat more. It's like, oh, there's a few pieces here that need to go.
Well, we can get. I've got a Nordic track.
But yeah, it's like breathe in. But you have lost a lot of weight. But as I said last week, just having you here is amazing, because where is it time we didn't think you were gonna be here.
Yeah, there were times. So I didn't mean to get anything maudlin there. I was trying to come up with good news. What's new? Oh, my suit's.
Are you coming back with Epic Life, or are you coming back with a cabin?
With what? Well, I'm thinking about the cabin is going to be not quite as often. I'm going to do the captain's log, 15 minutes a night, maybe a half hour. Reformatting. It's also going to be an audio podcast that will simulcast somewhere else. And then we'll maybe once a week do the captain's cabin, like on a Friday night I mean, that eliminates your Friday nights for going out. So you'd have to, you redesign your social schedule around, well, I'm not free Friday nights. There's that possibility. And, I'm just aching. There's certain things I want to say and I can't say them. So.
Well, I mean, as for me, I will be back on Sunday night with Wicked Women. We will be back at 9 o'clock UK time, and I'm trying to remember this: 2 o'clock Mountain, 3 o'clock Central, 4 o'clock Eastern, yay, and 9 o'clock UK. And please come and join us. And please, with Robertson, like, share, subscribe, share us. So we're, this channel has been. If you go to Scotty's channel, we need to bring the old Robertson over onto this one.
Yes, we do.
We can join them all up together. But please like, share, and subscribe. We will be back on the 12th of March, looking fabulously. Scotty, well done for coming along and taking the hat off and going for it.
And well done for having me. Wait, that sounded self-serving. You do well all the time. So it's nice to be here.
It is. And listen, I know you've got to run off now, so we better go. But please come and join us again. Have a great week.
All right.
You take us out, Scotty. Take us out with
I'll take us out.
Tones.
I'll take us out. Second star to the right, straight on till morning. And thank you, Wendy. Thank you for being here, being part of my life and part of everybody else's life. And everybody, thank you for being here. Go like the show. Give it a thumbs up over on YouTube. That helps our algorithm on this show. Believe it or not, that's very helpful. It helps who gets to see the show because of the algorithms. So put it up there and do not hesitate. And boy, that's it. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And both of us will see you in between. And maybe one of these days, Wendy and I will just be super spontaneous. And we'll come on in our jammies or something and do a broadcast.
Well, just watch this space. You never know, do you?
You never know.
But listen, guys, thanks so much for joining us. As I said, you can find Robertson on Facebook under Robertson, A New Era, and on Instagram. And also, please share our channel because we want it to grow. That's right. Scotty, love you lots. Have a great afternoon.
Love you big time.
Going to get the music ready, and I will talk to you later.
See you later.